Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Masterclass by Strata. My name is Narendran Sivkumar. I am a Senior Manager of Strategy at Strata. Now, we all know that healthcare is something that is important, both for the person and for the country. But did you know that healthcare is also a thriving industry? The healthcare industry in India, for example, is growing at roughly 22% year on year. If you're a savvy investor, you might have invested in pharmaceutical stocks and in shares of hospitals. But today we're going to be discussing something a little different. We're going to be discussing the idea of investing in healthcare real estate. And to do that, I have with me Sudarshan Lodha, the founder and CEO of Strata. Sudarshan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's just get on the first question, right? What constitutes a healthcare asset?
So healthcare is a very different segment. Everyone considers healthcare probably only as a hospital, but healthcare assets are hospitals, are your pharmacies which you see across, are outpatient clinics, are your daycare centers. There's a huge demand now for senior living, which also is in some sense as part of healthcare asset portfolio, because senior living are people who take care of senior citizens who are taken care of, and hospital is also pretty much in that, where they take care of people for all their needs. So that's a growing demand in a large way. In India, you'll see a lot of companies who are going to operate this in a large way. Many of the current hospital players are getting into that segment also in a large way. Like at the same time, when I bring you a topic about aftercare clinics or aftercare centers, when there's a critical care which has to be taken in a hospital, a patient has to be in the same facility with a doctor around him or a nurse around him for like 5-10 days also at times. So they push them out from the hospital to an aftercare clinic as such, where they are taken care of, because they don't need such serious care and the hospital beds are limited in India. So they put them into this. That's also a very large demand, where all the large hospitals which exist are now looking for
aftercare facilities
in and around, where they can still have them to do that. Another large segment in healthcare in general, which is not real estate but where is happening, is at home clinic, which is there, where people, especially for senior citizens or people who are in coma for years, for months, etc., there are people who are sent, nurses, etc., at home as well. That's also a growing opportunity in India. There are companies which are now trying to do this, and is also a very large opportunity here.
Interesting. But when we talk about CRE, then it's probably going to be like hospitals, pharmacies, aftercare centers, primary, tertiary, secondary,
and senior living.
And senior living. Yes. Interesting. Now we know that healthcare is growing in India, right? Our population is finally stabilized, but India as a country, we are growing richer, and we are going through that phase where people are more conscious about their health, and unfortunately our dietary habits are catching up with us, and we need healthcare. Like, there's a reason we are called the diabetic capital of the world, right? Our diet just isn't meant for the lifestyle that we have. But I get the appeal. I get why the government needs more healthcare, right? But why are investors jumping into this? What is this demand for investing in healthcare?
So great question. So the point is, from an Indian context standpoint, especially post-COVID, what has it really taught us that India lacks beds by a significant amount. Let's take global standards. It's about 3.2 beds is what India should have. India is today at about 1.8, 1.9. We are
just half,
just a little about half of the actual requirement to meet global standards. US, from a population standpoint, is today, from an Indian context, 6 times more with the number of beds, by having 1/3 or maybe 1/5 of our population.
Wow.
China, which is, let's say, equal to us in some sense, and are today at 9 times more beds as such. So what is the analogy to consider is that it's a real estate problem. It's not a doctor or a patient problem in this country predominantly. So there's a lot of play for people to look at this segment as an investment in general, and why we are excited.
Interesting.
What is also important to note is how insurance premium business has scaled up in India, especially in healthcare. In 2020, 2016 perhaps, if I can say, were about $3.5 billion in terms of yearly collections for insurance premium. Today we are close to about 10 to 11 billion.
Wow.
You see, the penetration is very, very high, which means two things are happening. One is people are getting aware why they should consider taking healthcare insurance. And second, which is very important to consider, is healthcare no longer is a luxury, it is becoming a necessity.
Right.
Quality healthcare.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to even a normal person who is making 30, 40, 50,000, but when there's a large disease or anything which happens for anybody, they want to afford the best in best.
Correct.
To take care of that, right? Most of the corporates today in India have made health insurance a mandatory thing for their employees, right? It can be an industrial, it can be IT companies or whatever. And for people who are paid below 15, 21, they anyway have ESI,
correct,
which covers them as such. But even those people who are in that ESI want to afford quality healthcare,
correct,
and are now also, apart from ESI, which their employers are taking separate health insurances themselves, so that they can afford the best in healthcare facilities as such. So the need of the hour, if we consider we are becoming like China, or we are on the path to have a growth trajectory like China in the next 1 or 2 or 3 decades, just do an apple to apple comparison. For you to be that developed economy, you need to have at least 3 or 4 beds per thousand.
correct,
Where India is currently at 0.5 beds. Right? So there is so much of a demand which is there. I mean, to beat China or to be on par with China, you need to be at 5 beds. Right? So it's a very big leap to be taken. Let's say we are not as ambitious as that, but even if half of what they
correct,
are, that it requires means 5 times of current infrastructure what we have is the need of the hour. Another interesting point to note today is medical tourism in India was a very large business, and it's going to continue scaling up as well. But apart from that, what is happening very interestingly is many of our Indian healthcare providers are now like setting up shops in Africa, etc. Are now saying, okay, you know what, you don't have to come here, we'll come there, and we'll offer the best in class facility as well. So because medical tourism was also a big chunk of business, but today domestic business itself is so much
exporting healthcare now
that you don't need beyond a point. So there's a big change which is happening in the scene right now, especially in tier 2, tier 3. Let me take Madhya Pradesh as an example today. Earlier, people in Madhya Pradesh used to go to Bombay for anything when it came to their healthcare requirements for something very serious, right? At the end of the day. Now, the likes of Kokila Ben have set up shops in Indore, correct, as the so-called financial capital of Madhya Pradesh.
Right.
And people in Madhya Pradesh are now saying that instead of going all the way to Mumbai is in Indore for me. To do it. The best in healthcare facilities are now
closer to them.
To them for them to, because everybody can afford. Just they didn't have access to it also. So that's another play. Is a large opportunity, especially the tier 2, tier 3 penetration. People can afford quality healthcare. They just didn't have access to it. Now healthcare is going to their doorsteps and saying, you know what, we are there to give you access. So that is that transformational change which is happening, is that people can afford quality healthcare. So now we are talking about it to be a necessity rather than a luxury, which was there.
Got it. I get where you're coming from, right? Like clearly we have a long way to go before we are able to meet the standards of, forget Europe or the United States, even China, and the government can't do it by itself. Private money is needed. But what is confusing for me is, why can't the hospital build these assets themselves? Why can't the big healthcare brands of the country do it themselves? Why do they want to partner with someone where they can lease the asset? What's the appeal?
So before that, let me give you another context. As such, so today when you build a hospital asset in a same location, and in the same location I build an office, my time to completion is at least 6 months before. A hospital is a little more technical.
Hospitals take more time
for you to build because the specifications are high.
Correct.
Number one, it costs you about 20 to 30% more vis-a-vis an office, and you get 20 to 30% lesser rents vis-a-vis an office. So for developers, it has not been very lucrative
Correct.
from a business return standpoint, that it's not making sense.
Yes.
Because at the same time, I can monetize better by building an office, get rents, etc. to do it. And Bangalore is an example. Bangalore lacks significant amount of beds to the potential Bangalore should have. So in general, because every developer is just not
I get
no
what you're
merit
saying.
for them to
if
do
there's
something.
land, why should I build a hospital? It's built to suit. I'll build an office, give it to anyone who wants it.
So this is how a developer thinks, because that's his business.
Correct.
We as investors think a little differently. We see, okay, when there's a 25-year kind of arrangements, 30-year kind of arrangement, because large hospital operators don't switch hospitals because the rent is expensive.
Yes.
Never happen.
They stay.
They stay. That becomes a landmark. When someone says, you know what, my property is next to that hospital, or from that hospital 1 kilometer, because people relate to that over everything else, right? So that is the other piece which is happening, right? So answering your question, why people are now considering that, okay, they've always wanted, they just didn't find right set of people who could do that, because at the cost of capital to what a hospital could afford, there was a big price gap arbitrage in the first place, why developers were not doing it. Second, investors who could do a hospital asset normally costs you, for a multi-speciality with a good operator, costs you anywhere between a 200 crore to 300 crore kind of investment. It's not for all. Correct? It's limited to all. So most of the hospitals have always owned their own assets.
Correct.
It's because no one was willing to put so much money to them and take that fund. Second is also been that most of the doctors who make money also say, it's my business, I'd rather just own my hospital.
Exactly.
So that has also been one of the segments as such. With more demand for healthcare increasing up, a typical multi-speciality with a 200, 250, 300 beds, it's almost 1 crore a room on an average, costs you about 200 to 300 crore rupees. And a hospital then on top has to invest another 200 to 300 crore in equipment, manpower, the working capital requirement before they hit break even, etc. A typical hospital takes a center takes anywhere between 18 to 36 months to hit break even, which means the brand is established, enough and more revenues are coming for them to afford rent, to afford any interest cost for the equipment which they've taken or anything. At the end of the day, it takes them anywhere between 18 to 36 months. So that gap is a large sum of contribution which they have to fund as well on top of it, right?
Correct.
So net it's close to 200 to 250. So if a large player to open a multi-speciality needs 500 crores to deploy, or 400 crores minimum to deploy.
Got it.
Right now, if somebody says, okay, he has 500 crores, he can do it, he'll rather partner with us or with anybody and say, partner, I can do 2 with the same money I have rather than do 1. Because end of the day, the hospital is not in the real estate business. They're in the business in the healthcare business to solve the needs of people or their healthcare requirements. So if they can do more with the same thing, and like I said, it's not a doctor or a patient problem, it's a real estate problem, and if we can solve for them in the most optimal way, because we are here as long-term, stubborn, 20-25 year kind of investors, there's a lot for us to make and a lot for them to gain by this kind of a partnership. So that is the awareness which is slowly coming in, that asset light is a great way to do it. You're becoming a real estate company rather than a healthcare company, because significantly on their balance sheets, the largest investments they've done is real estate, which they could put in best-in-class equipment, hire the best doctors, invest in branding, whatever it is for that matter, instead of blocking so much capital. Right? So that's why we are seeing a lot of play in this segment. Second, what is happening is a lot of private equity investments have now started flowing in this segment, where this segment, which was very promoter-driven, is now in some sense corporatizing as such, right? Many have gone public last year, many are due to go public this year, etc. So you're seeing they're all PE backed, high in corporate governance. Government is making everything cashless, even insurance making it mandatory also as such. So a lot of these things are making them realize that instead of blocking so much money, there is an ocean of opportunity over here for you to go out and penetrate into the market. Why are you blocking so much money into this? Rather, find the right partner who can put in capital for you, and you go ahead and focus on building other things, right? So that is the whole logic and approach which we have. Again, healthcare is an ocean. You have to understand several nuances. At least from our standpoint, we've been working on it for almost 1.5 to 2 years. understanding each and every nuances, what takes for it to hit break even, what are the problems, what is the attrition, bunch of these things to understand the thing, who should be the right partners we should have, what all should we look at in an operator. We've been doing our homework, got a lot of thesis around the entire thing, and then we started saying, okay, this is a segment I think we can make it big, provided we follow these rules. So that is one very important thing to consider as such, but that's where the opportunity will increase for us.
Got it. So you mentioned that that this is something that is new in our country, right? Most of even the biggest healthcare brands in the country used to be promoter driven. Now they're corporatizing. So now they're doing this. But what is the global perspective on this? Is investing in healthcare real estate prevalent abroad? What's the appeal for investors globally?
So it's very interesting, especially if you look at US alone. US today have 16 public REITs which are only healthcare focused, which currently have a market cap of almost $120 billion.
Amazing.
And generate close to $20 billion every year in returns because they are revenue sharing kind of arrangements.
Right.
So hence there's a higher penetration in returns if you're a long-term investor. So that is the other play as such. So there is significant amount of corporatization in real estate also required. If the operator is getting corporatized, so the real estate also is. We are trying to be early on to see if we can be the largest healthcare real estate provider in the country and see if we can be again one of the largest or the only REIT in the country in healthcare as such. So that is the other play which we see. Again, I'm talking only US, across the world, UK, Canada, etc. There were all other large companies as such who have done significantly well in the healthcare REIT. It's all about knowing how to do the trade and do your trade. There is enough and more opportunity in it.
So this is pretty much very common abroad. It's been done before. What we are trying to do is trying to bring the best global practices into India and try and do that for the growth of healthcare in this country. That's our objective, right?
That's our objective. Is one angle. The other objective is to grow the healthcare,
of course,
as well as the other angle. And for the other investors, is solid, stable, long-term, predictable income for 20-25 years as such, right? So look at it as a great alternative fixed income. Look at it as a great corpus to create for retirement. Bunch of these aspects can be looked upon because the more you stay, the compounding effect increases a lot.
Two last questions. So first one is, if you have to tell anyone, what are the top 3 or 4 reasons why you should invest in a real estate, hospital asset or any healthcare asset? What would be the top 3 reasons?
So let me reframe your question into 2 parts. What should be the reason and what should you look into?
Yeah, that was my next question, but yeah.
So, okay. So 3 things to look upon in general. Obviously, first is if you have that patient long-term visibility that I'll invest and I'll start getting rent for the next 20-25 years. Great asset class. You say, okay, I want to exit after 10 years as well. Great asset class because hardly you see assets because that becomes a landmark and the city builds around it also in some sense. Third, which is very important in general, is it's a great hedge to inflation and is recession-proof asset class in general because anything happens, healthcare is not going anywhere.
Correct.
Demand for healthcare will always retain whether the markets are up or down or whatever. In fact, if it's down, it might be probably more up because many people might be having issues. But anyway, jokes apart, but opportunity is very, very good, very stable for somebody who is looking at not having volatility to its portfolio. It's a great asset class for them to be a part of it. Now, what to look at before you're investing, first and foremost, is who the operator is.
Right.
That is perhaps 1, 2, 3 operator. Check who's the one who's going to run the show. What is his track record? Who are they being backed by?
Correct.
Are very important parameters to do it because there are, let's say Bangalore today has very small 100+ hospitals also. How are they performing? If you see, all are bleeding because the play is also moving towards large branded hospitals.
Correct.
Right? How it is in the US.
Correct.
Hospitals where it was some doctor who used to run a clinic is now opening a hospital. It's a very different dynamic for someone to run it. You can get lucky, but there are so many doctors, but there are only few who have really made it big and have built large hospital chains. They might have 1, 2, and they have issues of scaling up, not knowing, because running a hospital is very different from treating patients.
Correct.
Right? So there's a very different trait which is required for a doctor who wants to be an entrepreneur. Eventually has to let go his healthcare practice and be a businessman at the end of it if you want to run large hospitals, right? So it's a very different, it's not something which people like to talk about. But in reality, for running a hospital, you need to be a businessman also.
Correct.
Most doctors are, but managing both becomes a tough challenge. You have to choose one as well. So it's very important to see who the promoters are.
Who's the operator, who's going to be in the building?
Who's going to operate the thing? What kind of processes they have as well to run the show. Is it very single doctor led hospital where he's the most important person? So tomorrow, for any reasons, he decides to quit or anything happens to him, then the entire operation. So operator. 3 things over there. 1, with respect to who the operator is. 2nd, who are they backed by? 3rd, how is the performance been over the years? Then take a call around how you want to drive your business.
Got it. So top 3 has to be the operator. But what else should someone consider before they invest?
So first is your operator at the end of the day. 2nd, location. Where are you buying? At the end of the day, the price at which you're buying. Again, very important. Opportunity today will also be in hardcore city properties, but at the same time outside city properties, because cities are growing substantially as well, and it really doesn't matter in a large way as far as the demographic has the capability to afford that kind of hospital. Right? You can't go to a Belgaum tomorrow and open like a 5-star hospital because not everyone can afford
Doesn't
that.
sink.
So there'll be an opportunity that can they sustain in this market beyond a point. There was this hospital in Chennai called Westminster, which was from London, which opened with the idea of medical tourism or whatever. It opened, ran it for 2 years, literally no one coming because the prices are so expensive, and you have Apollo in the same market competing, right? So for them to survive, it became, and they had to eventually shut shop, right? So it's important to look at the track record also, apart from operator.
So it's again the operator, back to it, like, are they doing the right thing? And location.
Hence, like I said, very important on the demographic. Can the demographic afford that kind of healthcare? That was the logic. 3rd, obviously, you look at the lock-ins, leases as well. What are the lock-ins? What is the kind of commitment the hospital is putting into it? What are the kind of equipments? What is the investment they've made, etc. Ask them everything, right? Give me your MISs, whatever it is for that matter, to review all the equipment over there. Take out the balance sheet and review all these things. So that is the other piece, is the lease terms and the amount of investment the operator has made into the asset are the top 3 factors one should consider.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sudarshan, for your insights. It was great having you on the show. And folks, if you would like to know more about investing in hospital assets, do check out our website. We have a lot of interesting information around the topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. We hope you found this episode to be insightful. If you'd like to know more about investing in commercial real estate, be sure to check out our website www.strataprop.com and stay tuned for the next episode of Masterclass. If you do have any questions, please remember to put them in the comments and we'll be sure to answer. As always, please like, share and subscribe.